This is Fox 29 on the air with Mike Brignac.
My guest today, you'll know him from his tough-talking but caring style in the courtroom, and you can see his program at 2 o'clock every weekday right here on Fox 29. Judge Joe Brown, thank you for coming on the program. I appreciate the appearance, you coming by for a visit.
Good morning, Mike. My pleasure to be here. Lake Charles is a great place. I love it.
Thank you. We'll get you on tape saying that later.
Yeah. Right.
Promoting Lake Charles. Now, I understand you just flew in from Aspen, right?
Right. Sort of a lifestyle change. Instead of being down in the hood, you get up on top of the mountain and you slide down. It's a different kind of thing.
So what, just is it for vacation you're over there, or are you doing
Well, I've actually got a place there.
Oh.
Do a little ski racing, such like even made the sports section of the Aspen Times last week.
Did you?
It was busting a gate or two. You know, that's different from down here where most of the wet is humidity rather than ice. But I'm adaptable. I'll do both things. And we even had a celebrity ski race for what they call the Aspen Youth Experience. You bring kids in from the inner cities and barrios and you show them that there's another lifestyle, another way to be about things, to be successfully rated as a pimp, drug dealer, or somebody that's going around disrupting the order where in your community.
So what do they do there at the experience? You have guest speakers come in, or they?
Well, yeah, you do this thing where you get the kid to thinking in a different type of fashion than what he has had in his mind. You show them there's something else, you get them dedicated to doing things a different way, and they have a pretty high success rate. Now, I also still work with gang members when I get to Memphis. Matter of fact, I happen to be a reserve policeman for the Memphis Police Department. Who can tell what's going to happen in life?
You were the first African-American prosecutor
for the
in
city
Memphis,
of Memphis.
That's
right.
Memphis.
And then I was also the first one to run the city's public defender's office, which was a real interesting experience.
Now, this is back in the mid-'70s, right? Mid to late
right,
70s?
Mid to late 70s. And I got in private practice in 78. If you get stopped, pulled over for DUI in this state, as a matter of fact, the checklist that they're going to use on you is basically a version of something I drafted back in 1976. I think 39 states use a version of this form I came up with.
Wow. Well, now, back in the 70s, I know just from my experience here in Lake Charles, racism was a little more apparent even back in the 70s than it is now. It's still around, just not as out in the open. But what was it like? Was there pressure in Memphis back then, being the first African-American prosecutor?
Well, they had just integrated the courts less than 2 years before I got there. In other words,
Wow.
At that point in time, it was not even 2 years since black attorneys were allowed to get in front of the bar on a regular basis. Before you had to sit out in the audience until your case got called. Now, they had a little hard time with me when I got there, and they didn't know what to do with me. I can remember sitting in one court, it was a juvenile court we had, and I'm looking at some file folders, and it's just chaos in here, and I'm like, what in the devil's going on? And then this bailiff shakes my shoulder, says, "Judge talking to you, boy." I said, "Who the hell you calling boy?" And the judge uses the N-word on me, and I told him what he could do with himself. I said, "Well, you know, I'm here representing somebody, several somebodies. I'm not on your docket, and you have $10 jurisdictional limits on your contempt." So I pulled out a roll of tens and started telling him what I thought about himself. Well, guess what? Quarter of a century later, I wound up being in a position where I had appellate jurisdiction, and I much enjoyed it. You tell them that if they don't have anything under subpoena in the next 15 minutes, Mr. Williams, Mr. Duckett, Sergeant, go down there and arrest him and bring him here.
Wow.
That was an interesting change of pace. So you see, you treat people right. You never know what's going to happen in the future if you don't.
You never know.
Roles might get reversed.
I'd like to be in that courtroom to watch that, though. We're going to have more with Judge Joe Brown coming up right after this. Welcome back to the program. Judge Joe Brown is my guest. Now, you're in town for the Alpha Phi Alpha 100th anniversary, right? You're the keynote speaker.
Right. Actually, that was last year, but we will give us a little extra time.
Okay.
Still within that year. First of all, service to all, we shall transcend all. That's associated with the fraternity I belong to, and that's basically explaining what I'm about right now. As you owe an obligation to your brother, your sister out there, and the more you can do, the more you owe. It's all about advancing the human race, your neighborhood, your community, your state, your country, and being, shall we say, conscientious about it. I think that's gotten out of style these days. I want to feel good. Let me have what I have. Let me get what I would like, whether or not I earn it.
Sure.
That's not good.
No.
We were talking about this earlier, Mike. It's like no trophies at all. They have competitive sports where they don't even keep score now. You don't want the kids' self-esteem to be jeopardized by not being the best at something.
Right.
So
Well, their feelings might get hurt.
Yeah. So instead of encouraging excellence, you encourage mediocrity, so somebody doesn't have to compete. But, there are a lot of people in the world these days that don't like us, so, they need to get ready for a wake-up call.
Now, is this mentality of mediocrity, you see this across all of America, or are you talking about just the African-American community?
No, you see it all
everywhere?
across America. It crosses all color lines. It's from top of the society all the way to the bottom. And I think it started in the late 60s, early 70s with a reaction to the Vietnam War. It was kind of along the lines of war is a man thing. Therefore, to stop war, you change the nature of men, change the way boys are raised, unisex child rearing, no cap pistols, water pistols, God knows, don't let them play war, cowboys and Indians, anything like that. And you don't ritualize the apex predator on the planet. He doesn't know what to do with his capacities. If he's frustrated down at the bottom, then he does a drive-by, and you get a lot of disorder in the inner cities and barrios, trailer parks in Appalachia and other places, and it all goes to the devil. But you look at the top end, and soccer mom is taking kid to a place where he doesn't have to compete, and he's got everything spoon-fed to him, and he doesn't know about reality either. So we've got some things to do to change our circumstances, and that's what you see me do on a daily basis. Everybody says, how do you deal with those crazy people? Well, guess what? That's becoming normal now.
Yeah, it's not so you're right, not so crazy now. We have neighbors. Most of us know people
like
that crazy.
That's what they like me about sometimes. I smack down the guy that lives down the block that gets on everybody's last nerve, of the fool that you have to deal with when you go to work that just doesn't get it. We're dealing with urban girl-rillas now, and that's what we're calling the ladies. We're getting crazy situations like, wait a minute, you and the rest of your lady friends posseed up 5 deep in 3 cars and had 2 more of you driving 2 cars so you could take your kids to watch you do what you did? Well, they need to know what mother's not supposed to be the biggest thug on the block. You know what I'm saying? You watch your language in front of your mother. Not your mother can cuss better than you most of the time, all the time. Your mama isn't supposed to have gone and fired 3 or 4 rounds into somebody's car, or taken a baseball bat and gone after somebody. What's happening here?
I taught school briefly for a couple of years, elementary school, in an area of town that has a lot of broken homes. But I've witnessed this. It's a totally different society for the girls. I mean, the girls in my class were more violent than the boys were. I mean, in front of the class, in the classroom, just busting each other's faces, blooding their noses right there in class.
Yeah, see, people don't understand that. They have this fiction that men are fundamentally more violent than women. We can exercise violence more effectively, but men have these rules of engagement. Man, you didn't beat the dude, man. You sucker punched him. Fight fair. Fight like a man. Mandatory 8-count Marquis de Queensberry's rules of boxing, the manly art of self-defense. 10,000 people shooting at each other and somebody waves a white flag, everything stops. Rules of war, war crimes, Geneva Convention, Code of the Samurai, chivalry. You take that away from the boys, they get out of control, and when you don't have the boys growing up to be men to set and demand order where they live, then you start finding the girls getting more violent than the boys are, and it gets crazy. We have this thing with that I've noticed all over the world. You see young males now trying to perpetrate being a thug out of a gangster hip-hop rap video, sag-bagged and dragged with the hat at the felony or misdemeanor angle, and it's crazy. That's because what they usually see on television or in entertainment is very unmasculine these days. The boys are dumb dorks, they're cowards, they're not girlfriend or wife because they never have one, but aunt, next door neighbor, platonic roommate, classmate has to do everything for them. So they want something masculine, and they get the thug image, and the thug image actually is essentially feminine, because the prototype for the thug that you see in the rap video is a guy that's born when his mama is 12 through about 14 or 15. When he's in those critical years 4 through 7, when his character's formed, his mama is a teenager. His oldest aunt's 21 and his grandmama is 34 to 36, and his youngest aunt's 8. They tend to all be dropouts, don't work, nobody's had a job in 6 generations, and what he's thinking in his head when he is physically mature is what his 9, 10, 11-year-old aunt put in his head when he was 5. Bling. Man, you check out the bling, man, this too much, man. Why is a boy thinking about jewelry? That's because he's listening in his mind, though he doesn't know it, to his 17-year-old aunt who was talking about how she was going to get her some. How do you support yourself? Yo, Judge, with due respect, I got 4 ladies take good care of me. 2 got good jobs, 1 get a crazy check, and the other one on AFDC. They takes care of me. Well, that's because they're listening to somebody say, you know, hey, you know, you need to get some food, take care of you. Know, men ain't about but one thing, girl. Give them all they want, take all they got. And why do then you listen to all the B words being used on the rap video? Why? Because they're used to their mamas and all of their female grown, they think are grown, even though they're only 15-year-old relatives and aunts and stuff, saying, you know, all of them are dog's girlfriend. And like one 16-year-old put it to me, he said, well, you know, he says, I listen to my mom and all her friends, and they call men nothing but dogs. But all the dogs they've been having sex and babies with, they're either super freaks or guess what they are. That's where you get that B word coming in.
We'll have to stop you right there. I hate to interrupt that thought, though. We're going to continue this right after this. Stay right where you are. Welcome back to my guest. Today's Judge Joe Brown, and we want to talk about the criminal justice system. In previous shows, I've talked about the high rate of recidivism, offenders getting out of jail, going right back in. And what's the problem? Is it the system or is it society?
Well, it's society, and we've taken advantage of a system that is not broken so much as it has changed function. The criminal justice system is no longer there principally to control crime, but to control surplus labor. See, if you think of labor as a commodity like wheat, corn, cotton, soy, beef, pork, poultry, you know that when a commodity market gets glutted, the price drops and everybody in the chain suffers economically. So what we do when we have that is basically 4 things. You cut back production, subsidize would-be producers, store the surplus, and perhaps come up with an alternative use. Well, we put the surplus in a jail cell, the subsidies, the welfare check. The cutting back of production is ganged out, drugged out, pregnant too early, too often, developing inappropriate lifestyles, worldviews, no preparation, no training, no skills. So you cannot become an effective labor unit. You become chronically unemployed because once you get that felony conviction, you can't get hired. You keep going back to the storage facility, the jail cell, not the silo, and then the alternative use is that there's a $1 trillion high-growth industry providing supervision, transportation, communication, feeding, clothing, sheltering of inmates. You get them out of the way, you get an opportunity to have a massive transference of tax dollars to the smart entrepreneur. As an example, 96, I was running the grand jury since I was the administrative judge for the criminal courts, and they have to check all of the government entities' expenditures and everything, and there was a phone system that the taxpayers had installed in the various penal institutions. They turned it over to somebody for $1 upfront concession fee and an agreement that this individual would pay 6% of his net to the county. Well, he didn't even have to have an office. He had the thing operated through South Central Bell like a 1-900 psychic hotline, and for that year his net profit was $94 million. $1.25 to collect to the recipient and $1.25 a minute. That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. We're about to go to break, but I want to ask you this, though. Is there something being done about it? I mean,
no, because we are not addressing the fundamental things. We are not giving appropriate education. We're not discouraging single parenting situations, and we have made the negative a positive.
More from Judge Joe Brown coming up right after this. Welcome back. Judge Joe Brown is my guest. I want to talk a little bit about your show, and your show is really just an indicator of how your career was. You've been very well known for some alternative sentencing, like for convicted burglars, you might sentence them to open their doors up to the victim and let the victim select something out of their homes, right?
Well, yeah, that's if the perp was qualified for any sort of relief from full service of the sentence. I'd let the victim, armed with a court order, basically stalk the perp, and when they found that the perp was home or looked like some good stuff was in there, they'd call and I'd send the squad car out there with the bailiff's court order. They'd go in and the person could seize what they wanted. It got real funny. You have the whole community out there, and his girlfriend would be hollering, "You can't take my TV. What am I going to watch my soaps on? You just wait till they get out of here. I'm going to have your head." It was instructive to the perp, but most importantly, it was the tip of the iceberg, because I would be trying to correct some of these things I've been talking about. Wrong-headedness in the way you look at stuff, wrong-headedness in the way you dress, your lack of preparation in your life, and the wrong view as to what you're supposed to be about. This show kind of reflects what I've actually done in my legal career. It's ranged from, like I said, well, you haven't said, poverty law, EEOC, prosecution, public defender, private practice, criminal court judge. At one time, I had the youngest person in the world on death row, and I got a stay of execution 27 minutes before he was to be executed from the governor, who was Bill Clinton in Arkansas at the time, and the Supreme Court acting unanimously. He was supposed to have committed this crime when he was 13, and he'd been 15 2 weeks when they were going to execute him. I got him acquitted. I was the last judge to have this James Earl Ray Martin Luther King case in front of him. And it's interesting. Ray was not the assassin. That weapon that they had was not the murder weapon. And when we got into doing some background investigation, frankly, it looked like the FBI just took a dive, and they actually faked the test that they did. And a lot of other things they never looked at, no investigation. And I'm looking at Homeland Security right now, and I'm saying to myself, wow, they're putting in law what they had to pass laws to get rid of before. It's so subject to abuse. And they've got things right now that should scare the ordinary citizen. On declaration of somebody in a particular office, you can wind up with a tribunal where you can even secretly try an American citizen, hold him incommunicado, without counsel, without subpoena powers, and even sentence him to death in a secret tribunal. I'm getting in the airport to get here, and I've never heard this. It says, please be advised that if you utter a criticism, critical remark, or a joke concerning Homeland Security, you may be subject to arrest. And I'm going, if you criticize it, what happened to the First Amendment? If you make a joke about it, you can be arrested. What happened to the U.S. of A.?
Sounds like more like the USSR or Nazi Germany with this. I've not seen those signs, but that's troubling. Scary times. If you let it scare you, maybe we should do something about it. We're going to be back with more from Judge Joe Brown coming up after this. Welcome back. It's been a great show so far. Judge Joe Brown is my guest. We're almost out of time. A couple of minutes left. I want to give you kind of an open forum. Not like you haven't had that already, but any final thoughts, anything you want to talk about?
Yes, I do. Sagged, bagged, and dragged, and I also want to talk about the rights and obligations and duties that come with being free and having liberty. Homeland Security has dictated that we give up a lot of what we have, in my generation, assumed to be fundamental rights. Basically, that's because you're supposed to be fearful. But this was, at one time, land of the free, home of the brave, and a lot of people made the ultimate sacrifice in a number of ways so you could get free. And now we want to give up the freedoms we've earned just because we're slightly frightened. Sagged, bagged, and dragged. This is another example. Kids walking around with the pants dragging on the ground, low hung. The lower the sag, the cooler the dude. No. First time I saw it was 1981. I had a fiend in the penitentiary I had to represent, and I'm out there talking to him because the air conditioning's broken down in the conference room, and I'm looking at this, and he tells me that the person is dressed that way, which is sagged, bagged, and dragged, because most of the people are doing long, hard times, so they're turning these short-termers into girls. So that meant you would be turned out. And in the penitentiary now, it means you're spoken for. So I look at all of these boys walking around looking like they've been spoken for, and I'm saying, wow, you know, they really flipped to the other side.
I bet they don't know. They don't realize
they
what it means.
They don't know it. It's ignorance. But, you know, if you want to be free, it's a dangerous thing to be free, and you have to be brave, and you've got a 11 times greater chance of getting gunned down if you walk around a 2-block radius of where I grew up than you would have if you were in an American uniform in downtown Baghdad right now. It's all relative.
So it's up to us. I mean, we've got to just change the way we think. You're talking about the whole,
yeah,
all of society.
So in other words, earn what you get rather than trying to just get it because you want it. Mm-hmm. That's too much hedonism to me. You know, you got to deal with getting it together for real. Ladies be ladies, men be men.
All right, Judge Joe Brown, thank you so much for being on the program. We could go another hour. You can catch Judge Joe Brown 2 p.m. every weekday. This camera, there we go. We're playing games here. 2 p.m. every Monday through Friday right here on FOX29. And next week, Senator Jerry Tennyson looking at his career in state politics. That'll be interesting. See you next week.